I call traffic advisory meeting to order. Audrey, can you do a roll call?
Yes.
Do you have to press record, or does he do that?
I recorded, and he has started
Thank you.
as well. All right. Mr. Freeze, are you on the line? He's muted. He's here. Mr. Simmons?
Here.
Mrs. Donovan?
Here.
Mr. Morgan?
Here.
Mr. Jessic?
Here.
That's everybody.
Okay. Do you have a agenda that I didn't print a copy, or can you? Okay. First item is approval of the minutes.
Yes.
There's one right there.
Does anybody have comments? Changes? We approve.
Make a motion to approve as is.
I second.
Oh, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meetings approved. Does anybody have any comments, changes to the agenda? Okay. Next item, public comments. Do we have anybody that, no?
No, she's not, no.
New business. Community development capacity standards for local streets.
Right, so I think we've got two folks in the audience that are going to speak on behalf of this item. So if you both want to, Dirk and Aquila, you want to introduce yourselves and step up and, yeah, take a chair with you there, Dirk, for sure.
Are on. Haven't been here in a while. Okay, Dirk Schlagenhofer, Oregon City Planning Commission.
Hi, good evening. Aquila Hurd-Ravitch. I'm the Community Development Director. And he's, Mr. Schlagenhofer is the chair of our Planning Commission. I did add that piece in.
Oh, okay.
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Okay, well, actually, the reason I'm here, Commissioner Mitchell actually drafted this letter, and then we supported it. He's a better speaker, but he's no longer with us. He has moved up, so now I'm presenting it. You've probably read it, so I don't need to read it unless you want me to. Okay, all right. Anyways, I'm not going to speak about any specific development, but anytime there's a development and we have negative public comments, it's always about traffic. Traffic and livability. Livability is a lot of, traffic through neighborhoods. The standards that we're required to, consider are, and the data that the applicants are required to present is intersection counts, traffic at intersections, but we don't have anything for traffic on neighborhood streets. And a lot of times when a new development goes in, traffic goes through existing neighborhoods, which affects livability, but there's no standard for it, and so there's no way for us to really put a value on it. So when people say our livability's compromised, we don't really have a way to gauge it and make a decision based on any kind of data. So the reason we're here is to ask the Transportation Advisory Committee to possibly start the process of finding a way where we can measure traffic in neighborhoods, neighborhood streets, to go above and beyond the intersection counts which we're currently using. And I think Aquila might know more about how the process could evolve and where it would start and how it begins.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I guess just to recap a little bit, right now, when an applicant submits their transportation impact analysis, they're looking at level of service at the intersections. And then our code and the TSP have different standards, metrics for signalized and unsignalized and where you are in the city and that kind of thing. And what we don't have is the ability to measure the number of trips on a street. So the like maximum daily trips that could be allowed on a local street. So one way there's a couple options to go about this, but essentially what the Planning Commission was interested in was bringing the topic up to your group to see if you were interested in talking about it, getting some feedback, getting some data from staff and the city's consultant. So our traffic engineer is through DKS, and that's who we use to review all of our projects. And so the question would be if you want to hear more information about the topic and what kind of information you'd want to hear. And then I think the way the actual process would work is first you have a question to answer. Do you want to spend any time on this? And if you do, what data do you need and what research? And then if you decide that it seems like there should be some type of amendment or you want to make a recommendation to the City Commission, then your group can make a recommendation to City Commission that staff should look into this some more, that we should spend some more time analyzing if we want to have a code amendment or not. And that's not something to take lightly. Code amendments require public outreach. They're kind of resource intensive because they require time and money. So we definitely want to make sure that we get direction from City Commission to spend our time and money on a code amendment. And then it could happen different ways. It could happen with the TSP update, which is a couple of years out, and it kind of would make sense to have that as part of the TSP update and one of the things that gets looked at. Because the amendment, I think, should land there in the transportation system plan. And then we would have to amend codes as well to implement it. But it should really come from the policy and the TSP. So that's one way to do it. And then if you felt that it was more urgent or you felt like maybe it shouldn't wait until then, we could look at what it would take to get a code amendment. But it's kind of a circular process where it starts with just some questions from you all of, is this something that as a Transportation Advisory Committee we should look at? And if so, then, can we get direction from City Commission? And then eventually, as an amendment, it would work its way back through Planning Commission and to City Commission. And at that point, because it has so much to do with traffic, it would be back here as well talking with you. So that was a lot of kind of circular process, but that's kind of how it works.
I wanted to add something. I think you mentioned before when we were discussing this that other cities have something similar. Other cities have some metrics that they're using.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with them, but our consultant did say that there are some other cities that have implemented a maximum.
So we're not
daily
inventing anything. We can actually probably use something that's actually working in other cities. So it would probably make it easier.
I would say that being proactive and part of the process up front would be a good idea, as opposed to being reactive, which I think a lot of the time in our particular group tends to be. The information that you're getting from the applicant, is that entirely encompassing the information we're getting to make decisions off of? Or is DKS doing an independent evaluation on these projects in addition to what the applicant's providing?
Yeah, good question. So DKS, and by the way, they're our new traffic engineer. We worked with John Replinger for, I think, 20 plus years. So he's retiring, and now we're working with DKS, and they do this contract work for a lot of cities. What they do is work with the applicant on what should the scope be of the analysis, how far out, what intersections are they analyzing. And then they take a look at the analysis that the developer, the applicant's traffic consultant did, and they say if they agree or not agree, or these, you know, they did this correctly, I agree with these methods, they got the right intersections, that kind of thing.
So we could take that information and aggregate it over time and adapt the TSP or advise you guys too. And then if we saw an emergency situation, there'd be some sort of mechanism where we could intervene if we saw something that was going to be a serious impact and needed to be addressed immediately.
Maybe. I think in order to kind of have something in code that we can react to, we have to go through some kind of legislative amendment, and those usually take longer than our quasi-judicial development review. So if we have a development that comes in and blows out some intersections, we're required to make a decision within 120 days of when it's deemed complete. And typically, the legislative process takes longer than that, just to kind of work its way through and get the changes made. So it's hard to kind of react like that. I'm going to check with Dana and make sure I'm not. Okay, thanks.
So is it typical almost every application you have traffic issues, or it's just certain projects that,
Well, it's the issues, it's the applications that reach the planning commission, because at that point, they're really discretionary, they're larger applications. So it's not, I'm actually not sure what the percentage is, but we probably have more applications that do not go to the planning commission and that just meet their
standard?
Yeah. And then that's where we run into, and that's where the planning commissioners run into this need to make a discretionary decision on, is this development impacting livability? So if that's the question that we're asking in an application, that's where it goes to the planning commission, and they get to, kind of weigh all of the pros and cons. And it becomes difficult to do that when you have a development and then you have residents who are saying, this is going to impact our livability. The intersections may not be failing, so they can add the amount of trips, and we don't have any standards that say, well, you actually can't add that many trips to the street itself. I don't know if that makes.
No, it makes sense.
Okay.
Right, yeah, so, I mean, right now, if the intersection's not failing, we don't have much to say. There can be chaos, further up the road, and they may need speed humps, and kids may not be able to walk in the street anymore, but as long as the intersection's not failing, we can't say anything about it.
So are you looking for our involvement in the application process or in that 120-day period?
No, it's to.
No, it'd be nice if we had something that was a code that was usable
Code or
even.
standard.
Have you guys looked at any other cities and what they're doing?
Not very far. This is the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, we're starting here. One thing I wanted to say, though, is there are some developments that do not come to the planning commission, and they can be a reasonable size, but if they meet if they're right for the zoning, they don't need any variances, some things can just be approved at the staff level.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
It'd be nice if the code was even usable there. Because even at staff level, there's got to be some kind of some kind of traffic count, some kind of traffic study. And, the public involvement, they're still allowed to, they still put those little cards, in the field that people can, read if they stop and park somehow. But at that point, the public can make a comment, but it's more difficult. It's written comments. There's no hearing. You can't go in and speak your piece. So it'd be nice if it was, if it was actually in our code where it was relevant for all applications at a certain level. I wouldn't say it'd be for a single house. I don't know where you'd want to begin it. 5 houses, certain land size.
Yeah.
Those
I
are
don't know.
things that you need to, we need to figure out later.
We did
do the traffic counts on a lot of city streets throughout there. So does any of that data get sent over to you to look at? Excuse me, before they do
There
the
are
process?
sometimes traffic counts, yeah. I believe we've seen, sure, there's been data for number of cars, going down the road. But the data is, you got to be an engineer to understand it. And so then we're kind of at the mercy of the engineer to explain what those numbers
What the
mean.
numbers mean?
Yeah.
And
But
you're
if
looking, the counts are current counts. It doesn't tell you
How
once
it's
the
gonna be
development
affected
occurs,
afterwards.
how that's gonna go change. And
Yeah.
what we're talking here, as I understand, is exploring an avenue to amend or change standard where applicant not only has to look at intersections, but also look what happens
To the intersections.
Yeah.
to the grid around their development and how that's gonna be affected, right?
And then we have to put some kind of a value on the numbers, the cars going through a neighborhood, like where's the line when you cross it, is livability shot, you got to put some kind of a standard to it.
So this is kind of like Holcomb Boulevard right now with Icon Development. They got two projects on both sides of the road there, and there's no turn lanes on Holcomb Boulevard.
There's been comments about those developments.
And there's supposedly 400 some homes going to go in there. That's 800 cars minimum that are going to be traveling on that. And we already saw what happened during the fire. It was 2 hours to get down 2 miles. Because there was no
We got a
outlet.
lot of comments, much like that.
Yep. So, okay.
And that's where a lot of this is coming from.
Did DCAS suggest, name the cities where this is it done here locally, or is it done somewhere else where they're working, or?
They didn't say which cities, but they did say that there's some cities in Oregon that have average or a maximum daily trip count.
On the local streets?
Yeah. But we also didn't really engage them in the question. It was kind of like, hey, this question has come up from Planning Commission, and Rhea says, oh yeah, there's some examples out there. So I'm sure there's more detailed information that can be gathered.
I think would be interested to.
Yeah, I think in general, I think we want to be part of the conversation and help out wherever we can. I think coming up with the process sounds to me like that's going to be the most cumbersome part. But maybe if we can reach out to DKS, find out what other cities, whether they be local, regional, that's done this, maybe there's a blueprint we can kind of copy from, at least as a starting point to give us a launching point to get into this. But I think we're all willing.
Okay.
John, I don't know, is it possible to have DKS come and do a presentation on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think with the Planning Commission, just to kind of summarize this and package it, the Planning Commission is asking the Transportation Advisory Committee to do the homework behind what entails looking at the traffic impacts of various development proposals. We have several sizes across the city that come through, and figure out if we should look beyond the intersections, right? What does that look like? I think that's the question. We don't know. I can tell you that there's repercussions both in terms of the impacts that something like that could entail. I also think that, a lot of this problem is about expectations, where community members just see more traffic as problematic. And so that's always going to be the case. That's not localized to Oregon City. It will have impacts on development as well. So I think looking at all those things and then looking at a methodology where they can apply science instead of subjectivity is going to be pretty important. And I don't have the answer to that one. Maybe Dana does, but she knows it a little better than I do. But I just think that the idea of doing the homework, looking at this a little bit further, is what's being asked for tonight by the Transportation Advisory Committee. And I think that's a reasonable ask. And yeah, I think for our workload, just kind of looking at our calendar, it's probably going to be first part of 2023, there wasn't a timeline suggested. It's not like there's a project that's bearing down that's really kind of clamoring for this. So I think, yes, we can look at a scope, talk through that with the Transportation Advisory Committee and DKS and figure out what that might entail. I do think the other thing I want to say is you mentioned the transportation system plan. This committee spent a lot, well, not everybody on this committee, but a lot of, when we did the TSP, some of the members are still there. I think Cheddamer was on then. You weren't on at that time?
I think probably Henry was the only.
Okay. So we did a pretty deep dive on a lot of our major corridors, right? That's where most of our capital programs are at. But there's boulevards like Central Point, Holcomb, that are two-lane roadways and intend, the transportation system plan doesn't have a project for multiple lanes. Now, that's not to say that there aren't going to be turn lanes, because there are going to be turn lanes for the Sears development, and who knows what would happen on the other development. But so the TSP is intended to look at those corridors, but if it didn't dig deep enough and have a project specific to that, like for instance, there isn't a plan for, of top to bottom 3-lane Holcomb Boulevard or 4-lane or whatever it is that the community thinks is needed up there. That's not in the TSP. And so, that could come about, but keep in mind that's going to consume it's either going to really, really raise the cost of development or the cost of fees to property owners that live here now, or, it's just not going to be funded. So to figure out what that metric is, I think is step one, to figure out how we deal with it, whether it's a code change or a TSP amendment. Our TSP isn't it's just a couple of years off from when we plan to do a deeper dive on the TSP. So it may align really, really well. And I think the first thing is what does that metric really look like? Is it amount of time from one end, for a mile of our, our arterial collector or, a particular road size? Is that the measure? Or is it side street delays? I don't really know what that would be. And so just hearing this and reading the letter and thinking about it, I think the next move would just be to talk to DKS and not really think too much about the process.
And I think isn't it more impact on the local streets? Like we're addressing the major roads like Holcomb, right? They're going to have an impact. They're going to have to make certain improvements. Also, as part of TSP, cities making also certain adjustments to the network. We're talking now traffic getting onto the local streets and impacting those folks, which that's not really part of what TSP is looking. It's looking, how do I operate the larger network?
Right.
I would say that the data that we've had over the years of the traffic counts, they're done like in the early spring, right?
Right.
And if you could take, the several years before and see what the counts are and see how many movements per day there are average, then you can look back and say, okay, what development have we done in those areas there? And then you can get kind of an idea what the impact would be based on building another 50 homes in a development. And that will give you the data to compute to what's going to get to the intersection at the bottom of the hill or up the hill or whatever it is, that if there's going to have to be a redesign of the interchange, if it's going to be a roundabout or it's going to be traffic lights or something like that. For example, on Holcomb, it's not all the people who live between the city limits and Redland Road. There's a lot of traffic that comes from, what's that, Bradley, I think it is. And all those homes back there are not the unincorporated area of Oregon City. And so it'd be interesting to put a counter there right at the city limit sign, and then you figure how much traffic you're having just for that example. It's coming from another area that's transiting through, and then you're having these other developments in between that are, going to access it.
Most of the things that you're talking about, Tim, show up in that traffic impact analysis that each developer is required to produce, and they do a much deeper dive than we do annual. No, we do counts every 3 years. So I I'm not exactly sure when we do those during the year, but anyway, we do that once every 3 years. And yeah, you can see a progression. We've looked at some of that data in the past in terms of, community growth. But these detailed traffic analysis, they project that number as well. And they do it at a much higher level of accuracy and frequency than maybe even what we're doing with our traffic counting. So I know we just did a traffic 101. I don't know. I remember we shared it with the Transportation Advisory Committee. I don't know if you were able to listen to that meeting, but I think we posted that to our website as well. It might be worthwhile just for you to look at that as well, because it went through the process of trying to explain what a traffic impact analysis is. Because the Planning Commission gets to see those almost every development that comes to you, right? There's at least a letter. If it's small, it's a letter. If it's bigger, it's a study. And so, but that study does focus pretty hard on intersections and key intersections. Not every intersection, just key intersections. And so this idea of, well, yeah, but you got all these road segments in between, and may be a safety hazard at one of the small, local streets that connects to that segment, or there may be a bigger delay than the community expects. For instance, everybody's used to doing, would we raise the speed limit to on Holcomb, or lower the speed limit?
We lowered it.
Lowered it to what?
It's
35
35 now. It used to be, I think, 45.
So it may
Can't
be.
even drive down the hill with not even engaging. Just the hill alone will do 45.
That's right. I think I remember you had some indifference to that study there, Tim. But
I have a
but
lot
anyway.
of data on that, I can tell you.
But, there may be some community members that really feel like that's the speed that we should be able to do down there every day, every hour of the day. And there may be other expectations that as growth happens, that there's enough traffic to where you may need slower travel times, right? So it may take you longer to get to the bottom of the hill. So is that the measure? Is the measure, how long it takes you to get a mile on Holcomb Boulevard, or is it the amount of backup on side streets? So that, is that the measure?
I would say that it's been about a year now that speed limit has changed. And I think generally overall, people are pretty well monitoring it. Trying to drive to it. The people going northbound or eastbound actually are a little more aggressive on their speed, but the people going down Holcomb to Redlands Road are probably doing the maintaining of the 35. Now, the one thing it reminds you to do 35 is the radar flasher that posts your speed when you pass the grocery store, the little market there, Steve's Market. And I'm sure that has reduced their speed in front of that store. There's an awful lot of traffic that turns left. I don't know what the name of that street is, right where the other market is. And then the next exit up above there. And that's probably the most frequent left-hand turns are on those two streets there. So getting back to your point, would you need a liaison from somebody from this thing to be working more closely with you, with your department, to saying, hey, here's something we're working on, what do you guys know? And then we can filter it through our department here with the city?
I'm not exactly sure, because we really haven't done anything like this in the past. So either liaison or work sessions to, keep up on where we are in the process and what we need to do, what both sides need to do. And then at some point, we're going to have to bring this up with the city commission to make sure we're even, going down a road that they want us to go down. Because they're going to need to put it in the budget. And if they don't want to put any money into it, then, we probably need to know that sooner than later.
Yeah, if you're doing it proactively, it's going to be less expensive than reactive.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like preventative maintenance versus having a problem and then the building's falling down and now you got to gut it and fix it. But
We have a lot of problems. We have a problem every larger development, we've got a problem. Anything we can do to improve the system would be great.
Maybe to summarize, take back to your commission that we're interested in helping. Maybe if we talk to DKS about maybe some framework, and then if you guys want to check with the commission, the city commission, and see if there's interest for them to have us proceed forward
Okay.
Maybe those would be the 3 steps we kind of want to move forward out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Seems like
and I
there's
think-
interest here.
I think maybe DCAS comes and does kind of presentation on this topic. You guys could come to the meeting, listen, or be part of the same presentation and then see what.
Again, I think the planning commission meets more often than the transportation advisory committee, so they've got pretty heavy load usually, but what's happened in the past is I can't remember when we've had projects quite like this, but I think maybe during the TSP, where the planning commission and the TAC got in the same room together and they talked about results. And maybe that's what I'm hearing is, hey, can you look into this for us and maybe work on that? Come up with kind of a plan, and then maybe either somebody goes from the TAC to present to the planning commission, or we invite the planning commission here. That's the process piece that I'm not quite sure about, but I do think what they're asking us to do is kind of take on that traffic
Take a
assignment
lead.
for a little while, take the lead role on that, and then bring something back to the planning commission, knowing that planning commission's taking all the heat. Right? People don't show up here to complain too much about development. So, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. I think we should look into this.
Okay.
And can DKS work with the TAC?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So they can do the groundwork. Get a good base going.
So a question for you, do you think that planning commission wants to see more roundabouts for traffic? Or are they more into traffic lights?
I love roundabouts, but they're expensive.
I know they're expensive.
Yeah, we looked into the costs when we were working on it's not a Thimble Creek concept plan, but it was double. I mean, it was like 6 million compared to 12 million. It was way more. The amount of land it takes for a 4 or 5 lane roundabout is pretty crazy. So,
Yeah, I know a developer of mine, he said that in Multnomah County, it was costing $1 million just doing a residential area.
yeah,
That was in 18.
it was surprising. And so I've got a lot of, I love that it's traffic calming. It slows people down. It's really hard to run a roundabout,
Yeah.
But I hate spending other people's money like that. So it's taxpayers' money, and if we're putting that kind of money into like that, the 12 million to 6 million, that was a hard one to try to sell.
How did Ben do it? Because they got them everywhere in Ben.
I don't know. Maybe they don't ask the people. Maybe they just do it.
Keep in mind, there's other metrics to roundabouts besides the original construction cost. So the original construction cost is typically more, but how many signal light bulbs, Vance, do you have to replace in a roundabout?
Zero.
Right. So there's usually less maintenance associated with them. I would say Bend, their landscaping looks pretty expensive to me, but it's a trade-off. There's trade-offs. They're safer than signals. So if you count life safety, a roundabout has a lot of value to it as well. So there's studies that talk about these other things besides just the initial construction cost. But it's super hard to put in a roundabout in an existing. Try to plant one in an existing area
This
where
is when
there's
it was
everybody.
new development, homes in the whole neighborhood, and he had to put roundabouts in the various locations because it's his land, and they're dividing it all up already. So, but at that time, it was just $1 million extra versus putting in a T intersection,
Yeah.
Now, one thing I saw when we visited Ireland is the streets are narrow. They haven't redone them all, and their roundabout is basically a black circle painted in the street, and everybody just respects it.
Yeah, no, they can be. Good luck.
They also don't drive, 23-foot pickups.
Then you drive over it. Yeah, you use as much of that black circle as you need.
Yeah.
And people respect it, but I don't know how long it took for them to get to that point. I'm sure there was a learning curve. And it's amazing because you can just, as soon as you start to turn, everybody just stops. They respect you. They're not going to crash into you because you're doing something dumb. It works, but everybody's involved.
When we were in Europe, same thing in England, actually, we were on the wrong side of the street because of the roundabout.
Yeah.
We couldn't figure out the side of the street we're supposed to be on, but yes, they're smaller than what we have here.
Yeah. But it worked.
It worked.
Yeah. But I don't know how long it took to implement that to the point where it was successful. Yeah, I have no idea. but there's a lot of training. That's a place I don't even want to go with this because I think you have to do training like every few years just to make sure everybody's driving the same way. And that's the only way it can work. If everybody makes up their own way to drive, I'm going to drive this way and, I'm going to drive in this lane and I'm driving the speed limit. You can't tell me what to do. It can't work, so.
Well, thank you. We'll,
Oh, I could talk for hours.
yeah, we have other things to cover
No, I
here, but
understand.
we will consider this and work with John to put something together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, Public Works Report.
So really, I think Dana, Audrey, and Vance put most of these items together. They've got a presentation that Dana's going to lead, I think. And so I just get to sit back and
Enjoy.
relax. Yeah.
Having some difficulties.
Bruce is?
Yes.
Oh, no.
May not be here. All right. Our Public Works report. These are all the topics. This is the cover page that tells you everything we're going to talk about today. And then Dana will take over.
All right, so at the last meeting, you guys talked about the Berta Drive and Gaffney Lane intersection. So I've kind of pulled together a couple of slides with my review of it. And so this first slide has both the City of Oregon Cities criteria on the far left. And then you may recall in May of 2022, we had a presentation by Moji Takalu, who shared information from the Safety Handbook for Oregon's local roads and streets. And so I've included that criteria as well as another perspective. And then on the far right is the review of the criteria. So both sets of criteria have four-way stops as an interim measure for a needed traffic signal. And that isn't the case in this. We don't need a traffic signal at this intersection. The city's criteria has a requirement for 5 or more crashes in a 2-year period that would have been prevented by an all-way stop. And the local handbook has 5 or more crashes in a 12-month period that would have been prevented by an all-way stop. And so we've seen 3 crashes in 7 years, and I'll walk you through those crashes here in a moment. Go back one slide, sorry. And then our other criteria is 500 vehicles an hour on the primary street and 200 vehicles per hour on the minor street for 8 hours in a day. And then the Oregon Handbook criteria list 300 vehicles on the primary street and 200 on the minor for the 8 hours, but it also requires an average delay of at least 30 seconds. So for us in 2021, our street volume counts showed that Gaffney Lane's highest hour, and again, these counts were taken just off of the Malala intersection. And so that's the number that I have readily available. And we see the highest hour has 284 vehicles, and we have 6 hours that get over 200 vehicles an hour. So we don't meet either of those criteria for the primary street. For the minor street, Berta, again, this count was taken closer to Claremont, but that sees in its highest hour 164 vehicles. And so we have 6 hours where the vehicle count is over 100. So not meeting any of the criteria that we currently use for an all-way stop. So next slide. So this shows our crash history. And so this is a screenshot right out of ODOT's crash system. So you can see the yellow dots and the blue dots without the outline. Those are the dots that are the ODOT crashes for 2016 to 2020. And so you can see on Malala, there's quite a few dots. We've got the one yellow dot on Gaffney, kind of near Tina without the black circle, and that one was a 2017 accident. When I looked at the data for that, that was it was an alcohol-involved crash. It was a sideswipe of a parked vehicle in between the hours of 1 and 2 a.m. with a non-fatal injury, dry conditions, and cloudy. So that crash would have not been mitigated by a stop sign. That was an alcohol-related crash, and I don't think a stop sign would have mitigated that. So then the red dot with the black circle was the 2022 fatality, so I've added that dot in. That crash was kind of best described as the high-speed police chase that went down Gaffney Lane and did not make a turn when it got to Berta. And that's the vehicle that went through the yard, over the fence, and ended up in the shed in someone's backyard. They actually had a stop sign that they did not follow, and so I don't think an all-way stop would have mitigated that crash. The yellow dot with the circle is our most recent crash that occurred in October of 2022. When I looked at that crash, that was an alcohol-involved crash with fixed objects. They hit both a retaining wall along Gaffney and then, I believe, a street light and a tree at the intersection of Berta and Tina. And that happened in the daylight hours between 1 and 2 p.m. I do not believe that crash would have been mitigated by a stop sign.
That's away from the intersection anyways.
So the alcohol-related crashes, did they figure out where the alcohol started at? Coming from the same, is it everybody common that has alcohol-related crashes in here? All coming from the same area somewhere else?
The police, the system gives me a dot and it flags it as alcohol or drug involved crash.
It just seems strange that there's so many alcohol-related crashes in just one neighborhood.
Well, we might see more if we looked at other neighborhoods too, just saying.
I didn't realize there was
Which is a really good point that I want you to kind of hold on to.
Okay,
because I think
I'll
there's
hold on to it,
message
Miss
hold on to that.
Keep going.
So those are the three crashes. And again, the reds are fatal, the yellows are non-fatal injury, and the blue are a property damage only. So, periodically I pull up this mapping and I can look at where we're seeing high volumes of crashes for an intersection. And even with these two extra dots added, this intersection doesn't flag as a high crash intersection.
So Dana, was this brought to us by a citizen? I'm trying to remember, because there's been this has been brought up to us twice.
Yeah.
Was it citizen complaints that initiated this? Is that what?
I believe so.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if there was a citizen, or did Bruce?
I believe
Bruce
Bruce
raised it, yeah.
brought it
So Bruce
this
brought it.
most recent
He lives
time.
near there.
Okay,
And,
there we go.
but, his concern is about, pedestrians and just, I think, it is, so the three-way stop has always got confusion associated with it, right?
It's a little weird intersection, yeah.
But I want to say that at the time, I remembered that too. We didn't find much in the file on that last time we talked about it, but I remember that.
Yeah.
And, we looked at it then, it's got, yeah. So Dana's going to talk through a couple other things that we can look at.
So on the next slide, we did go out, we've looked at it, and we do believe that we could place some no parking signs in the approximate location of these red lines. We would need to do a little field verification, but that would give a little bit better sight distance for the vehicles stopped at the stop sign on Gaffney. Both the longer red line blocking the vehicles that could be parked in their line of sight, and then the shorter red line would provide a little bit more safety for a pedestrian trying to cross Gaffney there and being blocked by a parked car. And so these are options or recommendations on how to make the intersection feel safer for those using it.
What's the building up on the top there, that parking lot? Is that a school?
I believe it's
Elderly
apartment.
care.
Oh, yeah.
Is it a facility?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Dana, have you guys looked at some other, like a calming, how wide is that street, first of all?
I'm not sure.
Can we do, like, there's no room to do bulb out and narrow the street, kind of calm it, and then have, shortens the distance for pedestrians trying to cross? And it's going to slow down vehicles. You just have narrow space to navigate.
You can kind of tape, if you're on Gaffney coming from the school, so from the bottom of the screen up and you're taking that right, you can kind of do a sweeping right turn there. We could look at maybe even just some pavement marking that might encourage people to go a little bit more and make it more of a 90-degree turn instead of a,
Yeah, 45
yeah.
into it.
Jason Thornburg, Transportation Manager, and I looked at this last week, pulled it up on the maps, and we're both very familiar with the intersection. And that is the only corner that could benefit from more of a bulb-out situation. The corner on the northwest side of Gaffney and Berta, it's already pretty much a 90. So, there is potential there.
Just
for a bulb-out. Yeah.
just a question.
Yeah. What's interesting, though, is over the years, because the way that intersection morphed or developed, right? Because you can tell at one point Gaffney probably made a big S turn and went towards Molalla. And then at some point Berta came in. So there's an odd alignment there that we're all familiar with. 5, 6, 7 years ago, the Transportation Division put a berm on that inside radius of Gaffney, turning right to continue on Gaffney, and people would still cut the corner. So you can cut the corner pretty good, but people still cut it. So we put the delineators that you see there today, and that helped quite a bit because, again, people were coming off the pavement there. So even though it's a nice sweeping corner, people still like to take that little bit extra to cut that corner a little more. There are several different types of traffic devices we could put out there, from reflectors to delineators. Anything that stands up, I have a feeling that we could be in a situation where we will be continually replacing those things. Currently, the delineators that are off the pavement, those don't get hit very often and seem to be holding up pretty well. So if we looked at making a bulb out there, short of actually doing concrete and ADA ramp, if we think about it in regards to different traffic control devices, it really should be something that, people can drive over without wrecking them. And I would question the effectiveness of that for the folks that want to cut the corner.
What if you just fill it up with a little hump, little bumps? Just make a triangle of the bumps, and so then it's a disturbance. It's like,
Right.
those are a lot less expensive than putting a curb in, and there's really no sidewalks there, so.
That true on both accounts.
So that way, if
we
you
have to
drove
be
over that, you would be going blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Maybe people would get tired of it, especially if they're nice and slick.
correct. I'm tracking with you, and I know I can picture what you're talking about. The issue there is if we install things in the right of way in such a manner that it could cause somebody to crash a vehicle, again, the premise of having several bumps or reflectors in there, you could create a situation where a vehicle could actually lose traction, let alone a motorcyclist. So we have to be very careful of things we put in the right of way that if people do hit them could potentially cause a spin out.
So if you paint the fog line.
Yep.
And make it square or at right angles and fill that area in with the braille bumpers, I call them braille bumpers. I don't know what you guys call them. But that would force traffic to start driving square lines instead of cutting. And if they did cut it, they're not going to be tearing out the little reflector sticks. They would be just getting a rough ride.
Again, Tim,
I see what you're saying.
I see what you're saying. I would be,
So there's
I
got to be
would-
somewhere
I
in
would not be
between
a fan of
there.
that.
That would be the lowest cost and force people to quit cutting the corner.
Right.
but with a liability.
Without trying to mess up the liability.
So are you saying without the bumps that you're talking and simply painting something that,
Is this
turns it
a little
into an
bit-
F1 track where it's
You know,
very obvious where you're
right.
supposed to be going?
Painting or, double-sided reflectors every, 8 or 10 feet, so it delineates that corner the way we want. That probably would be acceptable, but to add more to where it really makes it like a rumble strip going through, I just don't think this is a location for that.
I think, you see it at intersections when you do bulb out and do a planter, it's recessed. People are not going to want to get their vehicle in there and they're kind of forced to slow down.
Right. It either needs to be something very
Yeah.
low profile or very substantial.
Yeah, or
Whether
you
it's a
just
planter
when
or
it's a
an actual
planter, then-
concrete.
Then they're going to avoid that and they're forced. That's the point of those things, to slow down vehicles. And I think that's what we want to do here, improve pedestrian connectivity and slow vehicles without stopping them, right?
Is Bruce on the line? He was the one that brought this up originally, right? Is he on the line?
He had to disconnect. He can't hear us.
Okay.
Oh, darn it. Okay.
But he is interested. I don't know if it would come through very well if I called him on the cell phone or not.
I'd be curious to hear his perspective on this since he's the one that brought it up, because I'm not 100% sure if we're trying to calm traffic or provide more access for pedestrian or safe passage, because I know the schools down here, we've got the neighborhood, we got people going to Fred Meyer. I'm not 100% sure where he was coming from.
Yeah, my sense is he was suggesting a three-way stop there, and that's probably the biggest thing that. My concern with the three-way stop there is that is more likely, in my opinion, to result in a serious accident, because that would be a big change at that location, and we're not showing any justification for it. Obvious. So I get real nervous about myself. Dana and I are the officials, the road officials that make those decisions. And unless the city commission, so it wouldn't even be the TAC, if the city commission said, you shall put a stop sign in there, okay. They've made that decision. It would be in the record. If there was a fatality there, they would be on the hook for that. But typically, that doesn't happen, right? Typically, it's something that the city engineer, that if you read our code, it is the city engineer who's got that authority to make that decision. And that's why we have this stop criteria, because if it meet warrants, it's much more defendable. If it doesn't meet warrants and somebody gets hurt in that intersection, it's not the TAC that they may sue the city. I doubt they're gonna sue the TAC. They're definitely gonna sue that city engineer. And so when we looked at this one here, I see some improvements. I'd like to make sure our signage is spot on. I wanna make sure the sight distances are clear. The interesting thing about Gaffney, and I encourage you all to go back there. Bruce is very familiar with it, so it would be, we were counting on his perspective here. But if you look at Gaffney as you're coming, I'm not gonna go directions, but as you're coming from the school to the Gaffney intersection, if you notice that roadway just has a little wow in it that takes you to the right. And that almost points you in that direction where some of these things that I think Tim and Vance were talking about was, well, let's square that up and make that feel a little bit more like a smaller radius triangle, right, in there. And maybe there's some room for that, to do that even further. But I also know that intersection lends itself to already kind of, allowing that movement to happen. And so I think we should, I'm not saying we shouldn't do anything there. I just want to make sure we're really hyper-focused on that idea and doing it. If there's a way to do that and not result in a bunch of liability, I'm all for it.
Is there enough room that two cars could be side by side and making a right? Because you know how sometimes you have some of these streets where there's an actual kind of natural turn lane? And then there's a stop sign kind of in the...
It's actually pretty narrow through there, I think, given...
So you really need to squeeze it down to make it one lane.
Yeah, it is one lane, but is there enough shoulder there to make it even tighter is kind of what you're saying, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think with your recommendation with the red lines or clearing the site, that improves the site visibility so that you don't have when somebody's turning, having a blind. If on Berta going down, I don't know, to the right, is that a stop sign there now or is nothing? It's just a free-for-all? Everybody can just kind of go
There's only one stop sign, and it's Gaffney coming this
down
way.
from.
The bottom of that longest red line is the only stop.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see where the stripe is there, so that's the only stop. in
Gaffney
base-
Lane has the stop
Yeah.
at Berta.
Gaffney Lane coming from Fred Meyer towards the school is where there's a stop. And the others just, so it acts like a T intersection. So
would
the
it behoove us-
others don't have any stop.
Would it behoove us just to increase the site distance, throw some paint down that's a low cost, low liability situation and then readdress before we did anything more substantial? I mean, it doesn't seem like there's enough incidents going on here to warrant throwing a lot of money at.
Yeah. I think the no parking signs, so again, Jason and I talked about that. He and I both agree with that. And that is something low cost, easy for us to put in. In regards to site distance, there's not a lot to be improved there. Both he and I have driven it recently. If you look on the inside radius there of Gaffney Lane and Gaffney Lane, if you're coming from the school, taking a right and headed towards Malala, there's a fence there, there's a tree there. The pavement goes within just, 3 or 4 feet of that. So there's just not a lot of improvement site distance wise, other than the no parking signs that we could do at this intersection.
So that would be your recommendation, is do that and for the most part move on?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do have one more slide with one other recommendation to address the school bus stop safety concerns. So I did double check, and where the buses are at are stops for both the high school and the middle school. The elementary schools within 1 mile, and there is no bus service to the students. So as you're traveling kind of from the bottom of the page up on Gaffney, and you come up to make that kind of sweeping right from Gaffney to Gaffney, there is a bus stop right there with not a lot of sight distance, advanced notice. And so we could place this school bus stop ahead sign in a fluorescent yellow color in kind of the straight section before that right turn as just an advanced warning for drivers that there's a school bus stop around the corner. And again, you could do that in the, going from the top of the page down towards the school. The reason I kind of placed this yellow dot kind of by the LN and Gaffney Lane is the frontage of this house on the straight section is actually a hedge right adjacent to the sidewalk, and we cannot place a sign in the sidewalk or we would not have an ADA compliant sidewalk. So we would have to place it kind of around the corner, but it would still give adequate distance between that bus stop there near Lazy Creek Lane. So these would be another option to address pedestrian and school safety.
Why wouldn't they put the school bus stop with the bottom line more towards the intersection there to stop the traffic going either way for the protection of the kids, instead of on a corner where they could come rear in them? Because I know from my experiences in Beaverton, the school bus drivers like to go over at the T sections and they pull in the intersection, it would freeze all the traffic so the kids could cross the streets from the other side and get in there. And that way, none of the cars could move, they couldn't make a turn, they couldn't go traveling through. So I would think that the bottom yellow would need to come down a little bit to the intersection and make that the spot. Then you have better sight distance if a car's traveling around and runs into the back of it there, since everybody likes to speed through there.
The bottom yellow one is approximately at Lazy Creek Lane. My bus may have gotten a little,
Your yellow line's supposed to come down farther? Or is it right?
Are you talking about
the
the-
signage?
yeah. The yellow dots would be general locations for new school bus signs.
the
Where the
signs.
bus is at is the
That's
bus
the actual
stop
stop.
location.
Oh, okay.
So is it possible that those bus legends do stop in the intersection, or is it really stopping around the corner and?
It is around the corner.
It is.
That's where the school district has their dot for the bus stop.
So you're gonna put a sign as you're making right turn from Gaffney to Gaffney, that there's, bus stop around the corner, and then on the opposite side, that there's one too. I think this is a good idea. I mean, I think what's the purpose if it's purpose to provide safety for pedestrians and make them comfortable use, then the treatment is gonna be different than if you're trying to accommodate vehicles. So I think maybe check with, we need to check with Bruce, and if it's uncomfortable to walk around there, maybe we don't have a crash data, but it's just not safe. The crash data is not gonna show that. So I think you have to put a different hat on when you're trying to come up with a solution, in my opinion.
Looking at the notes from the last meeting, he had mentioned that his concern was the high usage of the road, the speeding, the kids. It was really the safety of the children, and that there were the middle school and high school bus stops that he was mostly concerned about.
So if that's the case and the crash data is not, if we're focused more on the kids and the pedestrians, then I think the sight distance signs and the school signs, I think, would address what he was talking about. So I'd feel comfortable moving forward with that.
Okay. We will check with Bruce.
Yeah,
And
I
if
think
it
it's a
feels
good
like we
idea to
should
make
bring,
sure
if it feels like we should bring it back, we can do that too.
I can. Parker Avenue speed humps. So we purchased temporary speed humps.
All right.
And we have them installed on Barker. A little hard to see, but approximate location of 3 speed humps, or as you see on the map there. I don't know about Dana and John. I've not received really any kudos or why the heck did you do this from citizens. What I can tell you is when the crew was out there installing them, the majority of folks that drove by gave them a thumbs up or said thank you. It was kind of funny. There was a few people that you could tell didn't like them, and they were probably the people that are taking Barker because South End's closed. So for the most part, they seem to be working well. The first speed hump took us about a day, but once the guys figured out how to install it, because there's some nuances to how to install these things, the other 2 went pretty quickly. Next picture, Audrey, please. So that's an example of one of them. The center hump is mountable by a fire truck. I wanted to do these. I could have bought ones that went all the way across the street. I thought these would be more appropriate for most, not only this location on Barker locations, but if and when we utilize these in other areas where citizens have, inquired about a speed hump, and we can go, let's try one out and see how it works before the neighborhood,
Spends $10,000.
pulls their money and does all that. So what I don't know right now is how long those will be out there, okay? We're kind of at the mercy of the county and that South End project and how quickly they can get that reopened. So that's yet to be determined on when we will remove those.
I just want to emphasize temporary. We actually sent the neighborhood a letter as well, letting them know that they were temporary because they are temporary. That, the speed hump, you guys have a speed hump policy and criteria. This one wasn't quite there with meeting that criteria, but we knew it was a circumstance that really was more about trying to get folks that we've been trying to get to use a different route to use a different route, right? It was not necessarily, there wasn't like a lot of speeding on Barker.
No, if you recall, in our last meeting when we were talking about this, we did do a speed study on there, and, I think, as I recall, the 85th percentile was right around 25. So certainly a few people, like any street, that are going faster, but 85% of the people that travel that were doing 25 miles an hour or less. So it's a volume issue, not a speed issue.
Did you guys, did any counts before
Yes, we did.
installation to compare it, to see if there's going to be a reduction?
Since we installed it, we have not.
You're right, that'd be a good one to look
We
at.
have a loan counter we could throw out there and just see if it actually worked.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it'd be
kind of a good
And that's like, that would be like cool pre versus post
Yeah.
to see if it's helping out.
Right. Any questions about the speed humps?
And the sign gets to move too, that's portable?
Yeah, yeah. What will remain on the ground, we might pull that as a little V-lock system, but yeah, the sign would come out.
That's good.
I think that's a good way to start, that instead of going to the expense of putting the asphalt in to make the hump,
Absolutely.
you could test this out to see if it makes an impact on it and say, look, our data's showing it is working,
Right.
then go through it instead of putting it all in and finding it's really not
Yeah.
doing the effectiveness of it.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Tim, and it's, you know, in regards to permanent speed humps, as you know, it's, the city doesn't pay for those.
Yes.
It's the residents, so saving them some money and making sure that they actually, one, work, and two, you know, there is noise associated with speed humps, with trucks and trailers going over them. And you know, in a previous job in Tiger, there was a couple speed humps that ended up coming out because people just couldn't stand the noise generated by trucks bouncing over it. So people need to be careful what they wish for, right? So, anyway, that's what I have on speed humps.
What do you call those potholes work good too?
All right, at the last meeting, there was I believe, a request for an update on the speed limit review on Highway 213. And so back in August of 2021, the request was submitted to ODOT, the road authority for Highway 213, to look at the speed between I-205 and Redland Road. That section is currently posted 55, and the request was for 50 miles per hour. At the time, they quoted us a 9 to 12 month timeframe. We're past that 12 months. And what they have shared, both on this one and the Glen Oak one, is that the initial staff investigation and draft report is complete, and it's been submitted to the state traffic engineer. And I cannot tell you where in line we are with the state traffic engineers.
Well, the night that we had that meeting and I left here, there was a nice doozy accident right there again. And I don't know what the data was, but there was quite a few fire trucks and ambulances and wreckers. And it's quite scary to be sitting there at Redlands Road, either turning onto it or turning off of it when cars are flying at 55 miles an hour. And then the next two traffic lights down, it's 45. It doesn't make sense to have 3 traffic lights with a 55 mile an hour speed limit in less than 0.3 of a mile. So I would like to see that data when they need to stop, they need to slow it down at the first traffic light coming down the hill, because it's Mario Andretti coming down that hill. I mean, if you're doing 55, you're not going fast enough because there's somebody behind you that's,
Clocking 80, 90 miles an hour.
I mean, at any time there's a point where Oregon City needs revenue, that is the revenue king in the town.
Police department has been out on Highway 213 this week.
They are on to, oh, good. I'm seeing their budget going up.
So the Glen Oak Road one was submitted a little bit after the Highway 213. That has a posted speed of 30, and we presented to TAC 3 options: either leave it to 35, request a 30, or the city could sign at 25 without ODOT needing to review it based on the density and spacing of the driveways. And the TAC chose 30 miles per hour, and so that, again, was submitted to ODOT. That investigation and draft report's been completed at the staff level and is waiting again for the state traffic engineer that acts as the speed zone engineer.
Hurry up and wait.
Are there any other questions?
Those are nice pictures you have up there, Audrey.
Yeah.
Good
Okay,
job on those.
we didn't script this piece, so, and, I didn't realize until I saw today's email, so, our regular chair's not here, right? So, but I did see a poll. You did a little poll,
I did a poll.
and I saw an email from Ben. Were those the same?
Yeah, well, he just replied to the email.
Okay. So it looks like we have at least one volunteer for the chair position. right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be nice to have a vice chair, just because there's times when Ben can't be here. And I think at the end of the day, we've got to elect a chair. Assuming you all looked at that and considered that. I don't know if you did or not, but we don't have to make a decision tonight. It's just, we do, when is that come due? In December or January?
Not sure, I could double check.
I think we try to have election in December.
Yeah, so that means we have to have a meeting in December. Or,
I thought we were planning
or we,
Is
okay,
Henry not planning?
Henry's in
Africa.
Africa.
Africa, and I don't know if he was if he had the desire to remain chair or.
I know it was for this year, because I made the mistake of thinking it was last year that we needed a chair, and he was like reminding me, well, no, I'm still chair. But I haven't heard about 2023, so.
He's the one that gave us the reminder, but he didn't state his interest.
Yeah, he raised this topic last meeting, so.
So if we, sorry, are you looking for volunteers as a vice chair?
Yes.
Okay. And what are we supposed to do?
Well,
Put our piece of name on a piece of paper?
I mean, if there's a burning desire by somebody else to be chair, we could have a little competition, I suppose, but it usually doesn't work that way. Usually you figure that out amongst yourselves, and then, yeah, right? So all the years I've staffed it, I've never seen any arm wrestling competitions or any wrestling matches or anything quite like that for these positions. It's really just kind of work it out, and there's, you are volunteers, so.
I mean, I don't mind being vice chair. I am a chair of the Watershed Council, and I'm kind of busy with that, so, but I don't mind helping out. But if somebody else wants,
Yeah, I'm in the same thing, I don't know, yeah, I'll be happy, but I'd like to see what Henry'd like to do.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, I
because
think
he's
that
been
would
the
be-
pillar of this organization for a long time, so.
Yeah.
And if
we
he's
maybe
tired, then we'll
Check with Henry.
check with it.
Get his
on that.
blessing.
Because I don't want to push him out of his chair while he's on vacations.
Put him off the island.
Probably be going like
Welcome back, there's been some changes.
That's great. I think that's smart. He will be back by then? Yeah, okay. And then, did we get is there somebody else that's volunteered to be on the Transportation Advisory Committee?
We
I thought I
saw
saw
a notice
something.
come in, but Jacob didn't elaborate with me.
Okay, so there's more to come on that.
There's more to come.
How many openings?
Probably for December then.
Do we have 2 openings or just 1?
I think we had 3.
Yeah, we're down quite a few. So,
I'll get inventory of all that and we'll bring it to the next meeting.
yeah. Let's see, do any of you represent the Petronella? Do you represent the
Chamber.
chamber? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that was a missing one until now. Okay, good.
Yeah. Anything else on that topic?
Oh, sure. So we're just going to wait for Henry's response.
Yeah, I think we should.
And then next meeting, we can decide on what we want to do.
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
for those open positions, I mean, there's
It's an open recruitment.
open recruitment.
The city's got several openings on various boards and commissions, so they do social media posts on that, and it's on our trail news, and, so we use those mechanisms to try and get the word out on that, but if you know
that
somebody,
Citizen and or business owner, or do we have a limitation on, isn't there a limitation of how many?
you're right, there are, for instance, Cheddar, you don't live in the city, so we've got allowance for one person outside the city, so you're
Oh,
right.
So that allowance is our, so it would have
That
to be.
allowance is, there might be a couple others, and we probably just need to bring that to you next month.
Okay, and then we can start recruiting.
Because that's when you'll be able to.
Yeah,
look at all
I have
the-
it up here, like
look
those
at-
are our 3 vacant spots, I don't understand it as well.
Okay.
It's nice to have more members just because of quorum and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, especially if we're gonna pay to bring DKS on for this little assignment. I mean, I think it's an important assignment, but it's always hard to pay a consultant to be here if we don't have a quorum, or, we've got more members and, 3 don't show or something. That's, there's excused absences, I get that, but,
I think
Yeah.
that topic is of, I mean, I think carries some importance, I think.
Yeah. And I think it'll dovetail well with the TSP.
Hey, Audrey? So Miles Tatch is not attending virtually tonight?
He is not, he
Okay.
is working.
We should discuss that. There are any board member is allowed a certain amount of absences. And nothing against Miles, don't get me wrong, but he has missed a lot. So we should look at what he's attended and whatnot. What he hasn't, reach out to him. That's typically what we do, reach out to him, hey, do you still want to be on this or no? And go from there. But we'll, Audrey and I will look into that.
Between now and December.
Yeah. We'll have yeah. So we'll be able to report back to you on Miles and what he'd like to do. Okay, electric vehicle charging. So I believe Henry had brought this up, asked us to kind of look into things. What I can tell you that we have done is we reached out to PGE. PGE has a program that basically would pay for charging stations for your fleet vehicles. So PGE came out with a team of folks and met with myself and John, Kay England, our GIS person, and toured the facility, asked questions, how many vehicles do we think that we could convert to electric in the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years? We gave them that info. The answer is a few, not a lot. They have crunched some numbers as far as kilowatt usage, based out 10 years. It's questionable if we would frankly use enough kilowatt hours to make the program monetarily feasible. So I'm not feeling very strongly about that program, coupled with the fact that, because I asked the question, so if this works and we press go and we get these charging stations, can citizens use them? Can employees use them? And the answer was, you could, but it doesn't go towards the kilowatt hours that they track. It's only for fleet vehicles. So Henry was, I think, wanting to know more about charging stations in and around the city. That's something we just haven't really explored yet. For one, it's not a commission goal at this point. If it becomes a commission goal, you bet, we're going to explore that, right? We're open to it, but we're just not there yet. And when I think about it, I think John feels the same way, because he told me today. When we think about charging stations, the first step would be at city facilities, right? Charging stations for employees or citizens. I think the premise that Henry was alluding to as far as charging stations scattered throughout town, potentially not on city-owned property, I think it'd be a long time before we get there. So if I had to guess, in the future, our next step in regards to charging stations would probably be at city facilities for the use. Is there anything else?
That makes sense for the city, for the city to have them. But beyond that, I think it's
Yeah.
probably going to be a private effort.
Right. I will add that we continue to look for electric options. Myself, my lead mechanic, Dan Hepler, John and I talk about it. I would think that in the near future, you could see some of our fleet being electric, because we have several passenger vehicles, some Ford Escape hybrids, things like that would be conducive to being electric. If you buy one, they come with a charger. So that's the other thing with this PGE program. We're just not seeing for us, because we're not going to have 100 electric vehicles. We might have 5 to 10 in the next 10 years, right? Based on what we know now and what the current technology is. So, but we continue to look at them. And in fact, here a few months ago, we demoed an all-electric street sweeper.
Cool.
And it was good. It wasn't great. Range could be adequate. 8 hours is the range. Would take most of the night to charge. They do make a quick or fast charger to the tune of a couple $100,000. Our big fear, especially with a very large piece of rolling stock like that being electric, is when failures do start to occur, whether it's the batteries or anything else on the truck, when it's out of warranty, we could really be talking a large amount of money to do any kind of repairs, because it's not a good old Freightliner or Peterbilt. It's not a Whirlwind or Crosswind sweeper that's readily available locally with local support. So, we have to consider all those things, not just buying an electric street sweeper and going, hey, this is great, it's all electric. It's looking in the future and what those maintenance needs are going to be and support.
So do we have any city land that's accessible to the 205 that you could lease the space to Electrified America to put a supercharger in there, and then they could draw traffic, foot traffic into in the downtown area, so people could eat and things like that? Where you have transiting people, you'd be able to make revenue off of the space. They would be able to fill the need for the travelers going on the 205. Oh, Oregon City, because the closest one here is over by the Target at Clackamas Town Center.
Oh, interesting.
I'm into this now because I got my car now. So
What'd you get?
I got a Mach-E, which is the Ford's
Right, very nice.
SUV version of it. So that's Electrified America. So basically you're there 20, 30 minutes and you got a full tank. The next closest one would be Walmart and Target. Walmart and Tigard. We're talking about high speed. We're 150 kilovolts or 350, type scenario where you're really pumping a lot of juice in. So maybe to drive traffic, foot traffic, trade, dollars and stuff. I don't know about like where the TriMet station is there. Maybe that could be, because you've got a lot of food there. You got OC Taco and you got the Kentucky Fried Chicken and the coffee shop up the street there. Maybe some place like that, they could put a supercharger in, and then get some of the space, get some revenue back. Because, or if you put in your own let's say charge points in there, you can charge whatever you want, and then you get a spinoff of after the electric. So city would probably get a much better deal on their electric than Joe Citizen. To give you an idea what it costs, according to my little app, when I fill up in the morning, or when I fill up every week, it's about $10 to charge the car all night. And it'll take me 280 miles.
Interesting. That's good information.
So basically I can commute to Tiger and back 5 days, and Friday night I need to give a little to get through the weekend, and then I recharge it on Sunday, and then it's good for the whole week again. So compared to my gas bill, which was running $400 a month, down to 30.
Great. I just want to know, is it fast?
Really fast.
I hear they're really fast.
Really fast.
Tim, so you don't charge it at home?
I do charge it at home.
Okay.
I've
But
only
you're
had-
saying these other options give folks an opportunity to maybe build on tourism or something?
Correct. Yeah, and if you have a place where somebody can go and charge when they're in their route, either, because there's a lot of apartment people don't have any way of charging. So they have to go find, fast chargers to charge up, because they live in apartment buildings. There's no place to tap in. They can't throw a cord out. If you use an electrical plug, it's 3 miles an hour. You're talking about a week to get your car charged up.
How many are in the Clackamas lot? How many of those spots are there?
The one at the town center is 3. There's 3 superchargers there. And Target, at the Walmart and by the Costco and Tiger, there's 6. And that one's pretty busy. And then there's
Park.
Well, I was thinking, so the one place where we, at one point in time, worked with PG to get a charging station was right there at the public parking lot between 12th and 13th on Main Street. So there's a little parking lot in there that's for public use. And,
Oh, okay.
And with corner 14 and all that section,
That would
and
be
then Main
perfect.
Street just down, it wasn't obviously a supercharged, and it was in the public right of way, and it was old enough technology to where homeless people were plugging into it and using it more than, it wasn't time limited parking stall, so there was just a lot of issues with it, and it ended up coming out. But the idea of putting them in, we don't manage public parking. I'd have to check with the parking folks at the police department, but that's kind of, that to me is a perfect location for something like that.
And some of the companies have them, like instead of where a parking meter's at, you have a charging meter, and you can put them in a 3 in a row, on a parking, and so they're EV charger, and they're not as fast as a supercharger, but they're faster than a home charger. Because a home charger is putting in about 9.5 kilowatts an hour, and a supercharger is doing 300, 350.
It's a level 2, right?
Yeah, it's level 2.
I think ODOT is doing work right now to figure out this whole kind of electric infrastructure where, at least on the highways, the charges should be spaced, how often. And I don't know how close they're to that, but there's a work on that. And then I think maybe there's a funding under this whole infrastructure bill and stuff to look, maybe there is worthwhile looking into, there's money out there for the city to put this infrastructure in.
So I'll just share, ODOT is moving forward. They've received, sorry, I have to look at my notes here, $100 million over the next 5 years to implement electric vehicle charging stations on I-5, I-82, I-84, I-205, and highways 20, 26, 30, 42, 95, 97, and 101. And their intention is to have high-speed charging stations with a minimum of 150 kilowatt and up to 350 kilowatt every 50 miles.
That sounds about right.
So that's the plan. They've kind of prioritized those corridors and will move to implement and construct the infrastructure. I think I-5 was in the first year. I don't remember which other ones were in that first year, but it's a 5-year timeline.
Yeah, if you drive a Tesla and you go to Lincoln City, you're in good shape, because there's like 9, they're at the mall, at the outlet mall. If you drive a non-Tesla, it sucks. So you have to go to Newport, to the Walmart down there, and they've got a supercharger. I did get to test that one out. It does work good. So it was car was charged faster than I could shop. So that's what you want. You want the turnover. You don't want them sitting there for 3 hours, get their cell phone charged. You want it in and out in 20 to 35 minutes so that you can keep, more cars coming through. And
It's definitely direction that things are going.
Yeah, that's all we have, right?
I was wondering at the next meeting, do you want to set up like a 2023 goals, planning session along with what we've already discussed for committee members to join?
Yeah, I think that could be a part of the overall topic that we've got going on with everything else. One thing I'd like maybe to bring up again, I know we're kind of beating a dead horse, but tolling again, maybe an update on where that all sits. And then also, when we last talked, we were trying to look at some diversion data that ODOT supposedly has but hasn't released. And I think anything we can do to be proactive on that information of, where are we going to have to put infrastructure and release valves. And, I was pleasantly surprised when I came across the Arch Bridge tonight that I was telling Vance earlier, I was like, is it going to take me 15 minutes to get across? And I just flew right across. But I know if we do have this tolling coming, we've got some big headaches coming. Any time and planning, and I think every minute counts. So as far ahead of that we can get, the better.
yeah, I think we learned more from the candidates running for office, how much it's going to cost us, than we did from ODOT telling us what it's going to cost us.
Yeah, and I question whether or not that was accurate or not, but I would say that, so we did talk about adding that to the agenda tonight, just to kind of give you an update. We decided we'd give it to you in December. We think, well, right now we've got on the calendar the city commission work session on January 15th.
I think it's 18th, and I think it's going to be at the regular meeting as a presentation.
18th, okay. we expect ODOT to be there to talk about tolling, to talk about diversion. We do have, I'm getting my calendar, there's just a lot of meetings, so I'm not, but I'm gonna say in the next couple of weeks here, we have some agency meetings, so staff from West Lynn, Oregon City, Clackamas County, they've got multiple jurisdictions that are kind of meeting with ODOT to talk about some of these diversion solutions. I think for some agencies, there's solutions. For us, there's not a lot of solutions, and we get hit the hardest. So we're gonna try and sit down with them and see what kind of ideas they come up with. But the bottom line is yeah, we're really realizing that Oregon City, probably for several hours a day, would have pretty difficult.
Well, I've got a sneaking suspicion that the things that'll need to be done are gonna be unfortunately long-term projects, but maybe identifying stuff we've already got in the pipeline, stuff that's on the TSP that maybe could help, that we've already kind of got an outline for, that we kind of rush those up to the top of the plan.
Yeah, I think the frustration that we have is if there were projects, we could probably get, it's trying to find meaningful projects that actually move vehicles.
Right.
So I think the problem is 99E is, we don't see a potential for additional lanes. 43, or the Oregon City Westland Bridge is probably not gonna add lanes to that. There's those kind of scenarios. You've got a main street that you can't really do anything with, and you've got pretty much all the numbered streets that you might do. We've eked out all the efficiencies with the exception of maybe some signalization controlling, and then what's left is things like, how do you encourage more ridership on transit? How do you help pedestrians get around safely? But a lot of folks like you and Tim you need to get from your house in Oregon City to somewhere else, right? And that's a lot of Oregon City. So we've been racking our brain a little bit trying to figure out, well, what is there a right turn lane here? Is there a, do you manage access a little differently in Oregon City so that cars maybe can't make certain turn movements so it's a little more efficient? But there's
Kind of what, like coming off the Arch Bridge from West Lynn, if you kind of kept it a continuous right turn only, right turn on, right turn off, keeping things flowing to 99. So I don't envision all of a sudden we're gonna have extra lanes on 99 or 213 or anywhere else in Main Street. But can we, at least keep people moving in queue, and I don't know if that's put a Band-Aid on something that's gonna last for 10 minutes, but I think, the more time we have and the more information, and if they've got data that they supposedly have that's gonna show the impacts, the sooner we have that, at least we know we've got nothing we can do, but.
I do really think, like the Traffic 101 that we put on, trying to hit all the groups, Planning Commission, Transportation Advisory Commission, and City Commission, is not practical cost-wise because of the consultants. But if, we do record those. So my hope is if you didn't watch the Traffic 101 meeting, we can send out an email to this group about, hey, watch this link. And at least that's kind of like what they were talking about from the Planning Commission. That might cover that one. If you can't make it to the January 18th meeting where they're presenting to our City Commission, it's recorded, but you should watch that. I do struggle though to figure out how JQ Citizen, other than, I suspect it's gonna get to a vote at some point through initiative or something, legislature, I don't really know. But because it's gonna be very difficult for Oregon City. It might not be so bad for Lake Oswego or Tualatin, or maybe even West Lynn, but Lake Oswego, Canby, we're gonna get hit hard. Gladstone.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't ODOT wanting to implement broad congestion pricing and tolling throughout the metro area? So at some point, it's just, everybody would,
Be trapped.
yeah, and there's
Well,
just,
once the whole system's up and running, it's
Yeah.
basically a tax on everybody.
Yeah.
It's throughout, but the problem is they're starting here.
Right.
You know, so we've got to live through the growing pains of them implementing it here, and who knows what's going to happen as far as delays on part phase 2 and phase 3. So we've got to live with, you know, hopefully there's a way to stop it, but we got to move under the assumption that it's going to happen, you know? So we've got to be prepared.
they're putting infrastructure, that infrastructure is going in. It's in plans. That's already designed and it's gonna be constructed, so,
The gantries
yeah,
for the bridge.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm sure it's in our future. It's really, I mean, that's one of the big questions is why do it just here? And who knows if it's really gonna happen everywhere? And I think the answer is they need the money and they want less traffic on 205.
Be much easier to do it at the bridge at the Columbia River. Because there are 30 to 40% of the cars that are going down to work in the morning are Washington plates.
And the regional mobility pricing project would implement tolling on all of I-5 and all of 205 between the Boone Bridge and the Columbia River.
Yeah. And that would be the only tolling in the entire I-5 corridor, from Canada to Mexico.
There are, so there's a couple other meetings that I should try and find on my calendar here, or maybe my computer went off. Dana, I sent those.
Audrey, while John is looking for those meetings, do we have goals for 2022 that you guys already had?
We don't have any 2023, 2022 goals.
Okay.
So I'm gonna pull up some of the other goals that we've had in the past, so that we have something to work off of, and then it sounds like you have some ideas too.
I want to see what you guys did in the past, because I have no idea.
We did, I had one on was bad lighting in intersections or areas of high traffic with bad lighting.
Okay.
And we were successful in getting 3 streetlights on Redlands Road, right there at Holcomb and Abernathy, where the pizza place and the pad pantry
That's
is.
where it is, yep.
Those 3 lights were courtesy of my being a bull and he following up on it. So
Okay,
that worked out
lighting.
pretty good.
Okay.
Because it's just a traffic problem. I mean, it's a safety problem turning in there, and you can't see anything. So what we're trying to do is find more places of the city to find those lights, or those areas with poor lighting, and then work with PGE, because they have public money that goes into those projects. And then put the lights in. So if you know of any bad intersections that have poor lighting, or, you know, or bus stops that are
How much
busy.
time do you have?
Okay. Here, give me my email address. That was one of the goals that we had.
So lighting, okay.
The other one was, what else did we have on our, I guess, was working closely with ODOT to try to tell us what they were doing on this project.
So, not to keep this meeting going much longer, so I'm just gonna share that today I got an email from ODOT, about what they're calling the, Regional Mobility Pricing Project, which is pretty much metro-wide tolling or pricing. And there's an agency meeting on November 30th, but there's 2, public webinars so that the public can better understand these. One is Tuesday, November 29th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And there's a link, we can send this email out. And then Wednesday, November 30th from 4 to 5. And I'll make sure I forward this to Audrey so she can send it to you. But the idea there is for folks to be able to get a better understanding of what, I mean, they're just starting on the regional plan. We're a lot more familiar with it because we've been talking about tolling in Clackamas County for a while now. But, so anyway, that might be something to put on your calendar.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody, any other comments? I think we can call meeting closed.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Henry always hits the